I'm really glad to be here. Today we'll talk about leadership, but before I do that, I will invoke my speaker privileges and talk about myself for a little bit, right? Just to make sure you have my background. So I am an engineer at heart and by trade. I have a bachelor's and master's in computer science. I joined Oracle right out of college. And at Oracle, I developed enterprise applications for multiple verticals, such as manufacturing, supply chain management, as well as financials. And I had the opportunity to work on a few key strategic projects, so that gave me an opportunity to learn rather quickly. And I moved up the rank up to an architect at Oracle. And on the side, I was also teaching in a community college to keep up my skills from a market perspective, I guess. After having worked at Oracle for 6-7 years or so, I figured I will, bite the bullet and move to a startup. I am in Silicon Valley after all. So I did that, and I also kind of moved away from an individual contributor role to a management role. And I joined a startup called OnVantage. They were in the business of making software for an online marketplace for events. And I joined as their 89th employee, managing one product. And at that point, the company was making around $19 million in revenue or so. And we took this company from that place to a company that had 400 people that were making $60 million in revenue. And I went from managing one product to managing all applications for that company. So it was a very wild ride, and I wish I could say that we did everything right there. But I think as much as we learned the things to do, I also learned there what not to do, and that itself is, I think, is worth the experience. Then I went to actually China for a year to bring up the next generation of leaders there. After having done that for 6-7 years or so, I met my next boss at a Google meetup. One thing led to another, and I had an offer in my hand in 6 days. That's the fastest I've gone from hello to an offer. And I guess I had him at hello. So anyway, I joined Taleo to lead the #1 talent management suite of applications, cloud-based, for the SMB space. And I really consider that to be a privilege because I feel like that was a turning point in my career. I did that for 1.5 years or so when Oracle came back and bought us. So I found myself back at the mothership. So it was a whole circle that I did there. And I continued on at Oracle for another 2 years or so. And one interesting fact is the CEO of Taleo joined as the CEO of CA Technologies, and he pulled a couple of executives. One of them pulled me to run one of the flagship products at CA Technologies. And by the way, Atlassian is our competition. So, no pressure. All right. So, that's kind of my background. If there's any question, by the way, let's keep it very casual. If you have questions, just raise your hand. We don't have to wait till the end to answer questions. But that's my background. That's who I am. So let's do one little house cleaning item over here. I am an employee of CA Technologies, but at the same time, whatever the crazy talk you're going to hear me, that's all me. That's not CA. All right. So we talked about the fact that the title of this talk is Engineering Leadership Patterns and Anti-Patterns. So let's define the word leader. I want to be very careful because when we hear the term leader, sometimes some people can translate that into or think about hierarchies and people managing people, layers of supervisors, or equating leadership to management. That's not what I have in mind here. And I'm pretty sure, if you look at this picture, this is a picture of an assembly line where people have very well-defined piece of work. It's repetitive, it's mechanical. You need managers there, I get it. But how many of you ever think that this is not the world that we live in? Okay. I'm assuming most of you don't live in that world. We live in a world of knowledge workers. I believe that most, if not all of you, are knowledge workers. leadership is a lot more subtle in this world. You cannot be in people's face. You cannot be micromanaging. You have to get the work done in a very different way. And I'm hoping that, and so my point being this talk is not only meant for people that manage people or lead an organization, but anybody. In today's world, everybody has some special skills, they're specialists in some area or the other. So they are a leader in their own rights. They're leading something or the other. So this talk is meant for anybody who leads anything for a living. So let's start. You'll see a pattern, and let me kind of give you a clue about the pattern, and then you'll see that come through for everything. So you'll see a little bit of a code, and then I'll explain the pattern, and then I'll give you a little bit more details, and at the end I'll give you some relevant books, and that's how we will continue this talk. I have 10 patterns and 5 anti-patterns. So if you get bored, you know you're almost there. Okay. So let's start with the first one. This has to do with leadership style. I already talked about that we are mainly focused on knowledge workers. And knowledge workers, the leadership is a lot more subtle. And that means that your leadership style has to be a little bit more subtle as well. And in that way, I would like to introduce a term, what I like to call leadership fog. I think great leaders create this omnipresence, yet they are not on your face. So what do I mean by that? Every team member would know that you are there to help them. Nothing is beneath you, nothing is beyond you. So for example, if today your team needs you to wipe the table so that they can actually get going, that's your job. So nothing is beneath you. If your team needs you to now fight a budget battle and something that is somewhat complex, that is also your job. So your job is not well defined in that way, but your team needs to know that you are there when they need you, but you don't have to be on their face, on their hair, basically. I would also like to add to that by saying that one of my mentors told me this, and I really like this example, and I wanted to tell you, again, it comes back to the leadership fog that you create as a leader. Imagine your team or an individual team member walking this tightrope, right? And I'm sure you can relate to this. We live in an area where we are working on a product that is most likely very cutting edge, and you are going to have to take risks in order to make it in the market. So you're never doing you're not doing something that's been done before most of the time. You are taking bold steps to move the needle forward. That means you need to encourage a risk-taking culture, a risk-taking attitude. So you need to expect some failures. You need to kind of even encourage some failures to be able to move forward. Then what is the role of the leader in that kind of an environment? The role of a leader in that case is to act like the net. So if they fall, the leader is meant to catch the team or the person, not turn around and shoot them, right? But there is a caveat to this. The nature of the net is such that if you fail in the same spot multiple times, the physics will give in and you will fall through. The same is true for a leader here. You don't want to protect or support your employee or team for the same mistakes. Encourage your teams to make new mistakes, that's fine. Fall in different place in the net, that's fine. But don't, that's where you hold them accountable, saying that just don't make the same mistake multiple times, right? Similarly, again, coming back to the leadership fog concept, I was listening to this CIA director, I forgot the name now, but he worked for Obama during the time that he decided to take out Osama bin Laden, and he was explaining how they came to that decision, or how Obama came to that decision. So imagine, if you will, they're all sitting around the table, all the cabinet members, and they're looking at this, or they have listened to the same data about what they found so far about that man that's walking in that area and whatnot. So Obama said that let's hear everyone's opinion. What would you do if you are in my situation, right? And everybody did that. Many of them said, yes, let's go forward. There's enough data to move forward. And there's a lot of people that were skeptical and said, you know what, this could go wrong and it could be very politically damaging or whatever, right? So there was almost half and half in the room. So he heard them and he said, okay, I'll think about it and then I'll give you my decision tomorrow morning. He came back and said, let's do it. And rest is history as you know it. But this is a good example of a sort of a leadership fog, in the sense that as a leader, I think that during the decision making, you have to be extremely inclusive. You need to make sure that you are giving a good hearing to all the different and diverse opinions, because all of them in that example, when they came out with their recommendations, they didn't just say that let's go for it or let's not go for it. They make their argument. So now as a leader, you have heard many arguments, and you have looked at the same data as everybody else. You are much more informed in your decision making. And as a leader, you need to come across as somebody who is open to diverse set of opinions. At the same time, you need to be firm in your decisions once you have made it. If while you're discussing the decisions, all disagreements are welcome, right? But once a decision is made, you need to encourage your team to kind of commit to it and move forward. These are some of the, if you want to explore this concept a little bit more, these are some of the books that you could potentially read if you haven't read them already. Now, another thing about, good things that a leader can do is to make decisions based on what is right for your company, for your product, for your team, as opposed to get swayed by emotions or ego. You need to really be able to see the outcome that you're after, and not just what you are feeling today or what emotions you have today. I'll give a quick example. A mother and a teenager were having a lot of problems in terms of teenager not listening to her. I mean, I'm sure, I don't have a teenager yet. He's a 4.5-year-old, so I'm looking forward to my challenges later on in my life, but some of you may have had this challenge. So he would never come back to home in time. So like before sunset or whatever the curfew is, right? And she was arguing with him, and he was kind of almost denying the fact that, no, I listen to you, no, I come back on time, and la la la. Then she said, okay, let's do an experiment tonight. Will you promise to come back before 10? He said, yeah, no big deal. So now the mother is sitting at 9:45 p.m. looking at her watch, hoping that he does not show up so that she is right. Now think about it for a second. What is the outcome she wants? For him to be on time, not to be late. But that night, she's focused on being right. As a result, she's now hoping that he's actually late. Exactly opposite of what she was actually willing to achieve. That's what I meant in this thing, that you need to kind of get over your emotions and always have the true north in your mind, that this is what I really want. Let me not get emotionally tangled in this and focus on some other problems. On a related note, anytime you're trying to decide what is right, and I have seen this in bigger companies more than in a smaller company, I'll tell you this much, that at CA Technologies we have a portfolio of products, and I represent one product, somebody else represents another product, so there is an inherent conflict of priority. Whereas in a single product company, everybody is rowing in the same direction for that one product, right? So there is a difference there. But in general though, whenever you're, and forget about portfolio of products, even within product, let's say I am from engineering, but let's say there is a services organization, there's a support organization, and every one of us have a different aspect that we own about that product. Now it's very easy for me to optimize for my engineering goals. But does it really matter if we win in engineering but support loses? Because eventually the customer is not going to be happy, right? So it's very important to kind of, whether you call it company hat or you call it the product hat, depending on how far up you want to go in the chain. But point being that whenever you're having a debate, it's very, very, very important for you to kind of orient yourself that I don't want to only represent the function that I represent. I want to do the right thing for the product, for the company, because eventually if I win, I may not be actually winning for the product, but I might be locally optimizing for my own function. And I don't think anybody over here knows cricket. Does anybody know about cricket? Okay. All right, then this analogy will not make sense, but I will not even go there then, but maybe, I'm not very good at the American sports, but pick any game. Individually, you might be doing very well, and you might have the best stat in that game, but your team lost. Does it matter? It doesn't, right? So that's my point, that you need to kind of go beyond your own self-interest, and because once that happens,